There were days when he felt like the whole world was out to push his buttons. All it took was a careless word, a sideways look, or an unfair criticism for something inside him to catch fire. Anger would rise, his heart would race, and all he wanted was to strike back, to argue, to prove he was right, to not let it slide. But over time, he realized that every time he did that, he came out smaller. It didn't matter if he won the argument. In the end, there was always a bitter taste left behind, the sense that he had wasted time, drained his energy, and most of all, lost his peace. It was as if every fight was a slow poison, eating away at his calm. During one of those restless phases, he came across a phrase that changed the way he lived. Don't argue, don't take offense, just do. At first, it seemed almost too simple, even naive. But the more he thought about it, the more depth he found in those words. He remembered a teaching from the Stoics. It's not the insult that harms us, but our reaction to it. And that shifted everything. Because deep down, what really hurt wasn't the other person's words, but the space he gave those words inside himself. It was like carrying stones in his pockets and complaining about the weight, without realizing he could simply drop them. The next time someone tried to provoke him, he did something different. He took a deep breath. He stayed silent. He didn't answer back. And instead of wasting energy on someone who didn't deserve it, he turned it toward his own actions. He worked quietly, handled his responsibilities, delivered results. That's when he discovered something powerful. Nothing surprises people more than someone who doesn't respond with anger, but with action. If you've ever felt exhausted by pointless arguments, if you've noticed how they only drain your energy, maybe this message is for you. Here on this channel, we talk about how ancient wisdom can transform your life today. So take a moment to subscribe, because this path isn't easy, but it is liberating. He began to understand that arguing was like throwing wood on a fire that only burned away his own peace. When he fought back, he fed the flames. When he stayed quiet, he let the fire die out on its own. And that, in itself, was already a victory. But the real impact came later. Instead of wasting energy on words, he started investing in results. A colleague once mocked an idea he had shared in a meeting. Before, he would have fought back, trying to prove every single point. This time, he chose not to play that game. He went back to his desk, worked hard, and a few days later, presented the project fully finished, flawless. The same colleague who had laughed had no choice but to remain silent in the face of the facts. Action speaks louder than any reply, and this pattern repeated itself in different areas of his life. When someone doubted his ability, he didn't try to convince them. He showed them. When someone provoked him, he didn't waste words. He chose silence and focus. And each time he did that, he felt a quiet strength growing inside him. The Stoics had already taught this. Don't waste your energy trying to control other people's opinions. The only thing truly within your power is your attitude. And nothing is more striking than a solid result coming from someone who refused to be dragged down by anger. He began to understand that not reacting wasn't weakness. On the contrary, it was self-control. And self-control was a form of freedom. Freedom from being manipulated by emotions or by outside provocations. If you're tired of wearing yourself out in pointless arguments, remember this. Sometimes the best answer isn't spoken, it's shown. Every time you choose action over offense, you not only protect your peace, you also earn respect, even from those who once tried to pull you down. At first, it wasn't easy. The impulse to respond still came like a reflex. Every provocation felt like an old wound being pressed, demanding an immediate reaction. But over time, he began to realize that this impulse was like an invisible chain. Every time he gave in, he was tying himself more tightly to the other person's game. That's when the practice of silence turned into training. Each time he chose not to respond, he strengthened his discipline. Each time he swallowed an offense without bitterness, he felt he wasn't defeating the other person, but himself. And that inner victory had a far deeper taste than any argument ever could. He often recalled the words of Epictetus. It's not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them. An insult only had power if he gave it space. A criticism only hurt if he accepted it as a wound. Otherwise, they were nothing more than sounds in the air, without an owner, without weight, without truth. And the stronger he grew inside, the more surprising he became on the outside. Those who expected explosions found serenity. Those who sought conflict received silence. And while others wasted time trying to drag him down, he kept moving forward. It was as if every provocation became a step, and instead of going down, he used it to climb higher. If you also feel stuck in arguments that go nowhere, try this. Take a deep breath and don't react. Focus on acting, on building, on proving yourself through results. Because nothing has more impact than answering an attack with growth. He began to notice something interesting. The less he argued, the stronger his actions became. Silence, once mistaken for weakness, was now seen as confidence. People started to realize that not reacting wasn't a sign of fear, but of focus. One day, in an important meeting, someone interrupted him rudely. Everyone expected him to fight back, to turn the room into a battlefield of words. But he simply listened, paused for a moment, and carried on calmly, as if nothing had happened. The contrast was so striking that the person who interrupted ended up diminished in front of everyone. His serenity spoke louder than any reply could. That was the turning point. Realizing he no longer needed to defeat others, he needed to conquer himself. Because the real surprise wasn't in proving something to the world, but in becoming unshakable within. And at that moment, he understood that every provocation was a test. If he reacted, he lost. If he stayed in control, he won. The Stoics always repeated this lesson. No one can wound your soul without your consent. Words, insults, criticism, none of these hold any real power unless you give them space. True mastery is self-mastery. He began to see every silence as an invisible sword, every act of self-control as a shield. And with each situation where he refused to react, he grew stronger, freer, more surprising in the eyes of others. If you also want to surprise people, understand this. It's not by shouting that you'll be heard, but by quietly building something that no one can deny. Your actions will always be the loudest answer. Over time, he discovered that life has a curious way of silencing the voices that try to belittle us. There was no need to raise his voice to defend himself, because his results spoke for him. Silence became a kind of suspense. Everyone expected a reaction, but what came instead were actions so powerful that words became irrelevant. On one occasion, someone accused him of being incapable of completing a task. He could have spent hours debating, arguing, trying to convince them. Instead, he chose to act. In just a few days, he delivered not only what was asked, but something even better. Silence turned into surprise. The insult became applause, and the criticism became embarrassment for the one who doubted him. That showed him a powerful truth. Nothing disarms an opponent more than undeniable success. While most people waste time in meaningless arguments, those who choose to act keep moving forward, growing and surprising. Provocation became fuel, not for anger, but for discipline. That's how he learned to use every offense as a reminder of where to invest his energy. Every doubt about his ability became a reason to prove himself, not with words, but with facts. And in that process, he didn't just surprise others, he surprised himself as well. If you've ever felt the urge to respond to every criticism or prove yourself in endless arguments, remember this. The world doesn't move forward through debates, but through accomplishments. And when you focus on doing instead of being offended, you discover a strength far greater than anything words could ever give you. He also realized that silence wasn't only a weapon against outside provocations, but a way of protecting his own mind. Each time he chose not to take offense, he created a space of calm within himself. And in that space, he could think clearly, act strategically, and move forward without being drained. He had understood that anger is like a thief. It enters without asking and steals your energy, your focus, even your dignity. Every argument won left invisible scars, but every silence chosen left him lighter. Self-control had become an invisible shield, and the more he used it, the stronger he felt. In one particular situation, someone tried to ridicule him publicly. The whole room waited for his reaction. Yet he simply gave a faint smile and carried on with what he was doing without losing focus. This time, the embarrassment wasn't his. It belonged to the one who tried to attack him. The blow returned to the aggressor, and all of it happened without him having to utter a single word. The ancient Stoics always taught that true power doesn't come from controlling others, but from controlling yourself. The one who masters himself is not a slave to insults, but the master of his own peace. And peace, he discovered, was a silent form of power. If you want to surprise people, remember this. There is no gesture more powerful than standing firm while others try to shake you. The world expects you to fall. When you remain standing in silence, you reveal a strength no one can ignore. Over time, he discovered something even more surprising. Life always finds a way to uncover the truth. Those who mocked him, laughed at him, or tried to belittle him eventually revealed themselves, not through his words, but through their own behavior. While they wasted energy on criticism and attacks, he was building results. While they sought an audience for their insults, he was quietly building his own victory. It was then that he understood the essence of the phrase, "Don't argue, don't take offense, just do." The secret was to let the facts speak louder than any argument, because words can be denied, twisted, or forgotten. Results cannot. Once someone accused him of not being capable of leading a project. Instead of wasting time trying to convince them, he focused on the work. In the end, not only did he lead, but he guided the team to such an impressive result that even his fiercest critics were forced to acknowledge it, not because he had answered them, but because he had done it. That was the moment he realized that surprising others wasn't just about silencing them, but also about surpassing himself. With every quiet achievement, he discovered he was capable of much more than he ever imagined. And that discovery, in itself, was the greatest victory. So if you feel like you're wasting time defending yourself in front of others, remember this. No one can deny a result that stands right before their eyes. The best answer to doubt is action. The best revenge against criticism is growth. He also realized that his change in attitude had an unexpected effect. It inspired others. Those who once expected him to lose control now saw serenity. Those who thought silence was weakness began to see strength. Little by little, colleagues, friends, and even family members started to notice the difference and ask, "How do you manage not to take offense? How do you manage not to argue?" The answer was simple, yet profound. He had understood that the world didn't need his reaction, it needed his example. Instead of wasting energy trying to prove himself, he chose to channel it into doing. And by doing, he surprised not only those who doubted him, but also those who needed inspiration to act differently. That's when he realized that not arguing wasn't just a form of defense, it was also an act of leadership, because nothing leads more powerfully than example. And the strongest example is the one that shows control, focus, and results, even in the face of provocation. The Stoics used to say that true greatness is not being a slave to passions, and he discovered through practice that this self-control not only protected his peace but also became a beacon for those watching him. If you want to surprise others, start by showing what few people have the courage to live: silence in the face of offense, calm in the face of criticism, and results in the face of doubt. That is the response no one expects, but everyone respects. With this transformation, he began to see every provocation as a test of character. Not as a threat, but as an opportunity to prove to himself that he was in control. What once was irritation had become training. What once was an offense had become a chance to grow. And that's how he discovered something few people ever realize. The real surprise is not in silencing others, but in surprising yourself. Every time he resisted the urge to react, he realized he was stronger than he thought. Every time he answered with action instead of words, he discovered he could go further than he imagined. The results he achieved weren't only external victories, but above all, inner triumphs. The serenity that once seemed impossible had now become part of who he was, and nothing in the world could take that away from him, because it didn't depend on external circumstances, but on inner choices. It was then that he understood one of life's greatest secrets. You don't have to answer everything. You don't have to convince anyone. What you need is to act with discipline, embrace silence when necessary, and let the facts speak. Because time always reveals who is truly strong, and that strength lies not in words, but in actions. If you're hearing this now, maybe you're tired of explaining yourself, of trying to prove, of defending against accusations or criticism. But remember, your life doesn't need defenders. It needs builders. Every step you take is a brick laid in your inner fortress. And in the end, that fortress will be unshakable. In the end, he realized that life didn't need to be an arena of disputes, but a field of construction. While many wasted time arguing, he was learning to save his energy for what really mattered. And that was the greatest surprise, discovering that the true victory wasn't over others but over himself. Those who once mocked him now watched in silence. Those who once provoked him now respected him. And those who once doubted him now found inspiration. All of this, not because he had won debates, but because he had turned silence into action and action into results. This transformation showed that not arguing is not a sign of weakness but of maturity. Not taking offense is not accepting injustice, but refusing to hand over your peace to someone else's control. Simply doing is not running from the fight, but choosing to fight the only battle that really matters, becoming better every single day. And when that happens, the surprise is inevitable. Those who expected explosions are met with serenity. Those who sought conflict are faced with results. Those who wanted to see defeat end up witnessing growth. So if you're hearing this now, remember, every criticism is a chance to grow stronger. Every provocation is an opportunity to rise above. Don't waste energy trying to convince those who don't want to listen. Use that energy to build a life so solid that no one can deny it. And if this message speaks to you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Here, we share stories, reflections, and the wisdom of the great philosophers to help you turn challenges into strength and silence into power. Because in the end, not arguing, not taking offense, and simply doing is the most surprising path you can choose.